and welcome everybody. Thank you so much for tuning in. This is Adam from Miller's Custom Guitars and the N+1 podcast. Hey, I'm wearing a hat. We'll talk more about that at the end of the show. This podcast is all about hobbies, passions, obsessions. We like to bring on amazing guests and talk about, whatever they're interested in, whether that's prospecting or acting or music or guitars or whatever it is. I just like to get people on and find out about what makes them tick. The name of the show is N+1, not just what makes them tick, what they're interested in, but what is next. What's the next thing on the horizon? I'm a musician. How many guitars is enough guitars? N+1. The number of guitars you currently have plus one more. I want to bring these guests on and find out what's your passion, but what is on the horizon? What are you looking forward to in the future? And so that's what I talk to every single guest about on this show. So I talk to all these different people, but one of the things that has been an ongoing series for me, because I am a Christian believer, so I am also passionate about my beliefs. So an ongoing kind of mini series tucked into this podcast is I've been bringing on church leaders. We've talked to Ryan Lochi, who's a worship leader. And I brought in Adam Dolhonic, who is a pastor, and I brought in Jason Rivera, who is a youth pastor. And I'm talking to modern church leaders, and I want to find out how the modern day church is interacting with the modern world. How are we as believers fulfilling the Great Commission, right? Because at the end of the day, as believers, that's what we're supposed to do. Marketing malarkey aside, the lights and the fog and the all that other stuff. The end of the day is, go into all the world and, make believers. And so whatever all that other stuff is, how are we fulfilling the Great Commission? So I've been reaching out to people that I have seen fulfilling the Great Commission. And I'm reaching out to them and saying, hey, how are we as believers doing this? And we actually had a person visit our church a couple of weeks ago who is part of a missionary organization called For His Children. And when he visited, I tapped him on the shoulder and said, hey, would you want to come onto my podcast and talk about For His Children and the missionary work that they're doing? And so I would like to welcome to the show Darwin Snyder. Darwin, welcome.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Adam. I appreciate it.
Yeah. So Darwin is part of, like I said, the missionary organization For His Children. I don't know tons about it. I know I've heard about them throughout the years. So mostly we're going to let him talk about it because I would be making stuff up. So we're going to let you go into it. So let's start there. And first of all, tell us about For His Children. What is it? What do they do? What do you guys do?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, well, I have a personal special connection with For His Children. I was actually placed in their care when I was a little kid, and actually was placed at the orphanage here and was adopted from here. And the rest is history, as they say. But we're a Christian-centered ministry that focuses on really just caring, providing love and protection to children that have been abandoned, special needs, or neglected. And those are children that are in the area of Quito, Ecuador. And we have two homes that have been kind of growing. And we have one here in Quito, in the capital of Ecuador, and then one about 2 hours south of Quito in Latacunga. We are about 35 years old-ish. Don't quote me on that, but we were established in the 90s, and my parents got involved really early with the co-founders and the co-directors, and they decided to sell all their possessions and move their family down here to Ecuador from Nevada. And they did that and got really involved and just served alongside the people that founded this place and kind of built it from what it was to what it is now. And just a huge family connection. And now that I'm actually working for them, it's a full circle moment, and just beyond blessed to be here and speak about and advocate for the children there.
And so this is it only in Quito, Ecuador? Is it primarily in Ecuador? Is that where it's at?
Yes. So the physical location is in Quito. It's based in Quito, and we only have the second home in Latacunga. And currently we have approximately about 50 kids. So there's about 25 in each home, and ranging from any age to We have a few month old baby to I think 30 years old. So it's
Amazing.
quite a few kids that we are loving and caring for, and all God's children, and we're hoping to serve more and more as the years go by.
Yeah, the orphanage system in South American areas is very different than from U.S. areas. Can you talk to that about that at all?
Yeah, I think as typical Americans, we think of the foster care system in America, and we know
Hmm.
just how broken it is. We know it's really
Right,
not doing its due diligence. But specifically in Ecuador, they don't have a formal foster care system
right,
set up at all. They have little
right.
things here and there that the government helps with, but that is why our ministry is so crucial to the landscape and the community, because there just isn't foster care system. And for those kids that unfortunately don't have happy, healthy families that are they can be with, they're on the streets and they're cast aside, and so that's why a ministry like ours is so crucial.
In the U.S., there's tons of books written about orphanages, and in the U.S., if you're not paying attention, you don't realize that doesn't happen in the U.S. We actually have a foster care system, which I would say it has good intentions,
Right,
but most of the time it's a very broken system. But as
right,
broken as our system is in Ecuador, it's even more broken because it's more like the orphanages that we maybe heard of, except for it's not even that. It's just funnel these kids to like any place that'll take them. And fortunately for his children, is a place that these kids can go,
correct.
um, where they will be loved and accepted and cared for, um, and not just kicked out on the street. Sometimes all the way up through adulthood. Like you said, you said you had a person there that was in their 30s. They
Mhm,
will ongoing as much care as long as they need it.
mhm.
If they need it when they're adult, they can move on, or if they need continuing care, they can have the continuing care. Is that correct?
When we think about America and the foster care system there, when you turn 16, 18 years old and you age out, you get your couple bucks and you're thrown out and you're on your own. And a beautiful thing with our ministry is that we have advocated, but we have committed to the kids that are here for long term, for forever. There are
Mm-hmm.
obviously just some kids that just won't be adopted for one reason or another, and those children we've committed to for the rest of their lives. And so the home in La Cunga is primarily where that happens, and we have chosen to house the kids there that are getting older and will continue to age, and we will be there with them through the rest of their lives, which I think is absolutely beautiful. Again, for a developing country with so many people that are not no foster care system, little accountability. They're the country is healing itself, but there's so much work to be done. And so to have a ministry like ours that is willing to commit to kids long term and for their lives, it's incredible.
Yeah, that is awesome. Well, and I feel like this is a question I ask every single person on the show, which is, how did you get started with this ministry? What was your gateway drug? And I feel like you have a really special story, right?
Hmm.
Because you were just one of these kids, right? Can you tell
Yeah.
us a little bit a longer bit version of the story, starting with maybe when you were one of these kids in the orphanage, and maybe tell us a little bit more, because you kind of mentioned it a little bit. Maybe tell us a little bit of that story, and then how you ended up in your position. Maybe tell us what your position is now, um, with for his children.
Perfect. Yeah. Yeah. And I'll go back even a little further just to give some context. So when
Yeah,
my parents,
please.
they were living here, they'd adopted a little girl that she was found. Her name was Alita. She was found when she was just a few months old. She was found in a box in a garbage can. And that's how a lot of our children are found. They're found on the side of the roads or in trash or in, just abandoned on a doorstep. And they found her and she was so weak she couldn't her mouth would open to scream, cry as a baby does, and no sound would come out. That's how weak she was. And so they needed to feed her through an eyedropper. That's just how it was. And so my parents fell in love with her, and they decided to adopt her, and she passed away unfortunately just a little after turning 2, from pneumonia. And they
Mm.
it rocked them to their core, of course, but they still felt called
Of course.
and loved to continue to be there and serve with these kids. And then along came their second adopted child, Michelle, who had microcephalia and epilepsy, and
Mm.
she couldn't move. She had oxygen. She can talk. She couldn't do much, but she would brighten up the room, you know. And
Mm.
so they adopted her, and then this is kind of when my story comes in, and my parents, or my biological mother, I never met my father, and I still don't know who he is to this day. But my biological mother, when she had me, she was very young, and I think the culture is different down here than America. When you're a young single parent, you have friends in the States, you have family in the States, you have resources that are available to help you with your child, right? You have thrift stores, you have Goodwills, you have places that you can go to turn to. And in Ecuador, you're kind of shunned. You're kind of thrown on your own, and it's up to you to take care of the child, and that's it. And that, I think, creates a lot of emotional, mental trauma, and I think just a lot of things that are going on in the brain that are not good for any single parent to go through, much less one that's not mentally stable to begin with. And so when my mom had me, she would verbally abuse me. She would
Mm.
neglect me. She would leave for days at a time. I was a toddler, a baby, rice water, and that's all I was left in our apartment. She would just go, and she would be gone for days. And so the way I was found was as a natural toddler wanting their mom. I was crying and screaming for her to come back, and the neighbors were kind of getting upset with that, and they called the authorities, and the authorities busted in and didn't find anybody but this little baby. And so they took me and brought me to the orphanage for his children. And a few, I think probably a day or two later, my mom came back and was like, "Where's my kid? Where's my kid?" And the neighbors told her, "Well, the authorities took him. You know, you weren't here." And so she came to the orphanage and wanted me back. And another beautiful thing that the ministry does, which is what they're focusing on now, which is another beautiful thing, is they work on reunification with the family.
Sure. Of course.
Biological parents, right? They try to work with therapists and psychologists to figure out, you know, is this something that can be stable long term? Obviously, everybody goes through rough patches and things like that,
Yeah.
and so we went through that with my mom, and I would go visit her on weekends, and we did that for a few weeks. But what we found is that when I would go visit her, I'd be super excited to go, but when I came back to the orphanage after the weekend, I would be sad. And you would think, oh, maybe he's sad because he left his mom. I was sad that I even went in the first place. She would, when I would go, she would verbally abuse me, physically abuse me. She would say it was all my fault. And again, remember, I'm 3 years old at this point, you
Right.
know,
You're a
and
baby. Like, what could you do? Like,
exactly. Exactly. To blame, you know, your own disparity and your neglection for that child and blame it on that child, that just it doesn't click, right? And so it wasn't a comfortable situation for anybody. And so she eventually gave up her parental rights. And that was that. And then when I was brought to the orphanage, one of the first people that I found was my adoptive mom, and I clung to her so fast. I was a little puppy. I had to follow her absolutely everywhere. And granted, I mean, you're a toddler that just got abandoned by your mom, right? Of course, you're going to cling to the next woman that you
yeah.
see, and that's what happened. And luckily, the woman that I did see was my future mom, and someone that loved me and cared for me like no other. And they had their hands full with Michelle still at that point, and my mom wanted to adopt me, but my dad wasn't exactly all in on the idea. He kind of she pretty much asked him, and he was like, I think it's like a 0% chance, like I don't think I want to. And she told him, you know, would you agree to pray on it? And he said, sure, you know, I'll agree to pray on it. And my parents, they're farmers, they're ranchers, so my dad gets up at 4 a.m. still to this day for whatever reason. I don't know why, but whenever he wakes up super early, he loves the quiet time in the morning. So he prays, he reads, he meditates, he takes that time purposefully. And so he was apparently reading one morning in a book, and the book was lamenting the fact of things that you learn as you get older, and passing those things that you learned onto your the next generation or to your future children or whatever. And he just felt that the Lord was calling him in that moment, that I was going to be that next kid, that to pass on that those things that he had learned, he was going to pass those on to me. And
Hmm.
so that 0% chance of adopting me flipped to 100% real quick. And he was all in. And my parents were already struggling at that point because they were living in Quito, in Ecuador. They were struggling with trying to figure out when should they go back to the States because they weren't going to live in Ecuador forever. So they were trying to figure out, when do we go? Is this the right time? Do we feel called? Sort of thing. And as soon as they made the decision to adopt me, they felt an immediate release to go back to the States. And so they felt that one of their big purposes to be there was to adopt me. And so just absolutely special and beautiful to know that. And just makes me feel so much more loved and cared for anyways. And so we went through the adoption process and started staying with them. And I traveled to the States back and forth a couple times. And shortly before I fully we moved back to the States, I had a physical examination, right? When you're adopting a kid, you got to make sure that kid's not carrying any diseases, anything like
Right.
that. And so what they found was that there was actually, I don't know the technical medical term anymore for it, but what they found is that there, around the heart, there's valves, right, leading to all the blood vessels and everything. And they found that one of the little valves was still open that should have closed while I was growing up. And so if I were to get sick, even like a
Hmm.
flu or something, that could be dangerously terminal. And so they needed to perform surgery on my heart.
Oh
And
man.
I was 5 years old at the time,
My
just about
goodness.
to be adopted into this family, and was very confused and was very scared. But they helped me along the way, and the surgery was successful. No issues,
Wow.
and everything. The one thing that did come with it was when they were doing the surgery, they put an oxygen tube down your throat, right, to help you breathe during the surgery. When they pulled that tube out, it damaged the vocal cords in my voice.
Oh
And
no.
so that is why my voice to this day is like this raspy, kind of deep,
Mm.
soft voice. And a lot of
Okay.
people think I'm a smoker or I'm sick or something like that. And it's just, no, I just
Scar
had a surgery.
tissue.
Yeah, exactly. And
Yeah.
I had a surgery when I was young, and for a lot of years I struggled with it. I hated it because I would love singing or I would love doing things
Hmm.
and being loud or whatever, and I just physically couldn't do it. But over time, learned to deal with it and learn to love it because it's a beautiful story.
Wow.
Shortly after that, they adopted one more child, my sister Alexandra, and then we moved back to the States, and we moved to Yerington, Nevada, which is a small little country town
Right.
farming community.
I know where
Um,
that is.
yeah,
Yeah, I was
very
just
small.
mentioning to you beforehand that my dad lives in
Yeah, hmm,
Dayton,
hmm,
and yeah, we were just there visiting last weekend.
yeah,
So yeah, we're
yeah,
very familiar with the Carson Dayton area, and so I know where Yerington is.
yeah.
Because I've been all over there.
Yeah, so Yerington, the small little 3,000. It's not very big community, but it's the onion capital of the West, as they say. And that's my family. We grow
Yeah.
onions and garlic. We are part of that. And so that's where we moved to. That's where I was raised for the first few years of my life when I moved to the
Hmm.
States. And I had to, really mature and
Yeah.
kind of turn around things. And my parents had three biological children before they adopted
Sure.
the fourth. So there was, between my age and their older children, there was a 20-year age gap.
Oh
So
wow.
I had new siblings that were 25, 26 years old that are just getting married. And I had to grow up really fast, pretty much, is what happened. Their first child that they adopted, Alita, passed away. Michelle, unfortunately, passed away shortly after we moved to the
Hmm.
States. So it was just me and Alex at the home, Alexandra. And so we had to grow up really fast and kind of, we were loved and we were with a family now, which is great, but we had to grow up still fast and get acclimated to living in the States where they speak English and there's a lot
Right.
of people and things like that. And so I went through that, and it was quite a turnaround. It was interesting. I learned a lot.
That's an amazing story, and thank you so much for sharing that. I love to hear your progression on that story. So how does your story end up with you back in For His Children. So that For His Children basically got you out of Ecuador.
Yeah.
How did you end up back in Ecuador, back in For His Children? How did that happen?
Yeah, well, my parents raised me. They raised me very well, but
Yeah.
they taught me always about the importance of reaching out to people and involving yourself. And so when I went to college, and I left home for the first time, they encouraged me. They said, reach out to people. People you may not even know or remember, or just talk to them and introduce yourselves and say if you can help with anything, do that. And so that's what I did. The co-founder of the ministry here in Ecuador for His Children, I emailed her. I hadn't spoken to her in years, and I just said, "Hi, I'm doing well. I've grown up, but I would love to do something. If I can mentor some kids, if I can write letters, if I can help some families that are wanting to adopt or things like that, like just let me know." And so she had little projects for me over the years, and this was about 4 or 5 years ago. And she had little things here and there, but nothing huge. And then about a year and a half ago, the ministry now has an endowment fund board. So for people that are willing to put their in their wills that they're going to give this certain amount of money to for his children, we are those people that kind of reach out to people and see, hey, would you be willing to do that? So they asked me to be part of that, the board of trustees for the endowment fund. And I said, sure. I said, why not? It's something in the door, and volunteer Zoom call every few months, and I introduce myself and say my 2 cents, and that's it. And then we have a particular supporter that's kind of on the cusp of being willing to donate a large sum, and so I offered to, if there's anything that I could do, maybe even go visit that person, advocate for that person. I'd love to do that in person. And they said, be like an ambassador kind of role. And they said, sure, we'll think about it and let you know. And then this year, back in March, April, the new executive director of the ministry here, reached out to me and said, hey, I'm going to Boston in June. Would you like to tag along? And I said, sure. And she said, we're just going to be meeting with supporters and churches, and we'd love to have you tag along and share your story. And I said, why not? So free trip, right? And so I
Hmm.
went, got off the plane, and immediately went to a lunch, went to a dinner, went to meetings, and I loved it. And I'm an extroverted person anyways, but I just loved sharing the story and meeting people and hearing stories and listening and all the things. And then when I was being dropped off at the airport, the executive director asked, she said, do you want a job? And at the moment, I wasn't looking for a job. I just found something, and I felt comfortable in it. And so I said, I don't think so, but let me hear it anyways. And she said, well, I'm going to send you the details, and you look it over and let me know. I said, sure, I can do that. So I took a red eye back home, and got in really late, and then I had to work. But I got an email right after work, and she said, so have you thought about it? And I said, I haven't unpacked yet. I haven't thought about anything. But I said, I mean, it sounds cool. And she said, cool, do you want to interview? And I said, well, I still haven't unpacked. I haven't thought about anything. Like, I'm not sure. But I said, why not? This interview can't hurt. And so had the interview the next day, and it was my hour long, and we just both parties just asked a lot of questions back and forth. But as soon as that interview was over, I felt that this was going to be a game changer, that this was going to change my life immediately. And a few days later, they offered the position. And so my title, my role is the development coordinator for His Children. So my focus is all of our supporters and donors that are in the States, in the United States, the entire country.
Hmm.
My job is to cultivate those relationships, whether that's emails, phone calls, visiting in person, like I did in Sonora a few weeks ago.
Right.
It's meeting those people and just making sure that they feel that they're supported for supporting us. Because that goes a long way, especially in this day and age. Those face-to-face interactions is just so crucial. And so that's how it came to be. And 3 months ago, I took the job on, and now I'm currently in Ecuador to get some kind of on hands field experience, and so that when I go back to the States, I can say, hey, I've been to Ecuador and I've seen what's been going on, and just make those stories a little bit better. And so yeah, that's how it all came to be.
Yeah. That's amazing. I love to hear that. That's a great story. And I love to hear what the Lord is doing in you and
Mhm.
through Forest Children. So now that you are in it, you're in the ministry of Forest Children, and
Mhm.
you, like I said, you came through it. What are, and it's basically a missionary organization, right? It's
Right.
it's it's reaching out to children, it's supporting children, and it's funded by the support of
Mhm.
people that are never going to see these kids, right? Um,
Mhm.
what are some misconceptions that you've come across, or that you maybe hear about, or maybe that you have had that you
Mhm.
can maybe address right now?
Yeah. Well, I think one of the biggest things is I think for a lot of when I was adopted internationally, of course, right? I was adopted from people from the United States adopting an Ecuadorian
Right,
child. That was 20 years ago. Now,
right,
that number, that it was very common for that to happen. Nowadays,
right,
that's completely flipped. Countries, and this is happening all over the world, not just Ecuador, countries are not exactly big fans of international adoptions. They want to be proud of their
right.
children that are in their countries, and even though they might not be able to take care of them at that moment, they don't want Americans or they don't want other countries to come in and just say, "Hey, I'm going to take your kids and I'm going to raise them the correct way," sort of thing. It's a pride thing. It's a and it's one of those things. And nowadays, that's what's happening in Ecuador. The children that are getting adopted from forest children here in Ecuador, instead of international adoptions, they are Ecuadorian adoptions. They are national adoptions,
Mm,
which is beautiful. The country is healing itself. They
yes,
are taking
it's
accountability for
amazing.
their own children, and that was a huge misconception for me because again, like I said, I was an international adoption. Like I knew like, oh, that's what I assumed it just was. But over time, as I started to learn more about the ministry and how it's changed over the last 20 years, um, I've learned all those things, and that for me is the biggest thing that is going to stick with me for the next little while. That I'm just like I'm blown away. I'm shocked, and it's beautiful again, but it's so surprising to me. And so, a developing country as Ecuador is, it's
Right,
still struggling in certain ways. Of course,
right, definitely.
it's not a third world country, but it's developing,
No, it's not.
and so the country is
Right.
doing better, right? And that's beautiful. But I think that's another big misconception for people is they imagine it's some third world country that we see in movies and nobody has anything, but people drive cars and they have Wi-Fi and all the typical things. They have KFC
Yep.
and all those things that you just don't think about. And so those are probably the two big things: is the national adoptions and just how further the country has come since I was here.
That's something that I've heard of also, is that that, like, as far as the adoptions go, and I would say most of the time, like probably 95% of the time, all the international adoptions were with good intentions. People just wanted, um, they just wanted to give love to kids that needed
Right.
love, and there
Right.
might have been some people that had some malicious intentions or whatever,
Of
but
course.
people just wanted to love kids that needed love, right? Um, but there was some people that had that idea, like, well, they're stealing our babies, you know
Right.
and internationally, people have said, well, let's take care of our own kids, and that's
Yep.
such a great sentiment, and
Yep.
like, heck yeah, let's do that. Let's take care of our own kids, if they're able to. Yeah, like, let's definitely do that. But it's funny that you said that, let's, like, that they have KFC, because I wanted to jump in here with a little bit of story time, because, and I mentioned this before we were recording, because I lived in Ecuador for 2 months.
Yeah.
When I was 14, I was a
Okay.
freshman in high school, and my aunt was a professor, and she went and did the receiving side of the foreign exchange student program, and she was stationed at La Católica, in Quito,
Oh.
Ecuador. Yeah,
Yeah.
and so I went and lived there for 2 months, and so I lived in Quito, Ecuador, and I just went on independent study and, like, lived with my aunt in
Right.
Quito, Ecuador. So I kind of did some stuff, like I hit up my doctor, and we got a bunch of donated supplies, and we took him, and I don't know where we took it. Might have been for his show. I don't know. We just took him to a local
Yeah.
orphanage and dropped him off. We went and lived in we went and visited the jungle for a week. It was really cool. We went and visited Banos. We went to
Oh,
visited
yeah.
Colombia one weekend. My aunt was very outdoorsy, and I was not. She wanted to go see everything. Um,
Yeah.
I have a bunch of crazy stories, but one of the stories that I remember, you said that they had KFC. I did not find that to be the case, and I was 14. I was very boring. I was not very. I was not one to explore and be
Right.
like to try new things. And I found, and maybe it's changed. I found the food in Ecuador to be very plain, right? And there was
Very
one
blunt.
time we went to a mall or something. And I just remember going up the escalator, and there was like a food court that had like Taco Bell and like the KFC. And I just remember my eyes going like, I have arrived in heaven. Like there was a McDonald's and a Taco Bell. I was like, there is food here. There's real food. Anyway, it was
Yeah,
just an amazing
that's
time.
awesome.
And then there was one time, and this was back. This was so I was 14, so this is like 94. Okay, what is this? Like 30 years ago, you know.
Yeah.
Uh, and this was back when they used sucres instead of. I
Oh,
know they
yeah.
a couple years after I left, they switched to actually using U.S. money because it was devaluing so fast. Like when I got there, it was
Yeah.
3,000 sucres to $1. When I left 2 months later, it was 3,500 sucres to
Yeah.
$1. That's how fast it was devaluing, right? There
Crazy.
was one when I got there, and I just had 1 year of Spanish, of freshman year high school Spanish, and I jumped on a bus and I had 700 sucres in my pocket. So that's like 40 cents, right?
Yeah, I was gonna say 50
And
cents.
yeah, so it was 3,000 sucres to $1, right? So like it's not even. It's like 30 cents.
Wow.
And I
Yeah.
jumped on the bus because I didn't want to walk to the La Catolica, which was, I mean, it's like a 10-minute walk, but I was
Yeah.
lazy. And so this one time I just wanted to take a bus, but I didn't get off at the right stop,
Oh
and I
no.
missed the stop, and I didn't speak Spanish. I was too nervous, and eventually they kicked me off. I was just lost
Oh
for
no.
I was lost in Ecuador, and I didn't speak Spanish, and then I had 300 suitcases, 700 suitcases in my pocket. So then I got on a different bus, and oh my gosh, my aunt was ready to kill me, and all I could say was like La Catolica, and then, oh yeah, and oh my gosh, and eventually, and if you remember La Catolica, it's got like the blue to purple like rainbow windows,
Yeah.
and so when you eventually go up the hill and you can finally see it, it was like the sun split from heaven. I could see, oh my God, I'm not gonna die. Oh my gosh, my aunt, she's like, I was ready to call your dad and tell her I'd lost you. I was like she was ready to kill me, man. She was so afraid. Like I was just lost in Ecuador. I was like so hungry and so thirsty and she's like, okay, the next time this happens, here's what you do. You like take a taxi, you tell them where you need to go, and then
Yep.
tell them we'll pay you when we get here. So anyway, that was a funny story. So,
That's awesome. That's awesome.
oh my gosh. Yeah, 14-year-old, no Spanish,
Yeah.
700 suitcase. Anyway. So, what are some of the some of the biggest challenges that you guys face in this ministry? I know that there are some big ones out there. I mean, opposition, is it finances? Is it empathy? What are some of the biggest challenges you guys face?
I think the number one thing that comes to mind is finances. With anything in the world nowadays, it's not just in Ecuador, it's not just in the third world country or developing country, it's anywhere. It's getting support and finances. And so donations is where, we're running a little short, but we're hoping God's will, right? He'll take care of
Mm-hmm.
everything as he does and in his timing. And he's been taking care of us for 30 plus years. So we
Yeah,
know
of course.
we'll be fine. It's not like I'm going to be laid off or anything, but
Yeah.
but yeah, it's I think it's one of those things and we are having a lot of the in country idea and perception of giving financially from in country is still there's a lot of mistrust. So people in Ecuador, if they're going to donate anything to our ministry, they're donating clothes. They're donating materials. They're not donating money because there's still just a lot of mistrust. In America, if I'm gonna, run around and try and fundraise for the ministry, it's not incredibly difficult. where I can get that money. But to bring materials from the States to Ecuador, that's a little bit of a hassle. Whereas it's kind of different. And so I think those misconceptions and those perspectives from a lot of our donors that are in the States, right? I think
Hmm.
uh, a very large portion of our budget is from strictly support and donations. And so it's one of the big things that I want to focus on in the next coming years, besides just supporting our supporters, but also welcoming them to come down and visit. Come down and see what we're doing here physically. I know
Hmm.
we love our vacation days and we love spending our times at the theme parks and our time at home, but if you have a weekend, come down and visit us and come see what these children are going through, what these caregivers, we call them tias, which is the Spanish word for aunt.
Right.
We call them our tias. Come see what the tias are doing. Come see all the hard work that we've put in and the incredible amount of generosity that we've received from those people, right? And come see what your money is going towards. And so that's, I think, kind of our struggles, but also what our goals are. We want to focus on making sure that, we are getting in our donations, we're getting in our support, but we're also giving back as well. And so that, I think, to answer your question, that's kind of hand in hand in both where we're
Mm.
going right
So, and then this kind of leads me to the question I've been asking everybody on this series, which is, how do you feel like this ministry is going about fulfilling the Great Commission? Right,
now.
go forth and make disciples. How do you guys feel like is your way to do this?
Well, I think a big thing is my job, right? Is actually going and meeting people, because that's word of mouth is incredible, right? And that's how you go out and do these things. You talk about it and you share your stories and you share stories of other people's impact. And we've had so many people over the years that have come and visited, and we've had kids and teenagers and young adults that will come down, and after they've come down, they've changed their entire lives. Kids that wanted to be firefighters or astronauts or be, famous or whatever, now want to be physical therapists, now want to be doctors, now want to be children
Mm,
caregivers because of what they've seen down here. And so I think that's one of our ways of kind of discipling towards others, is by, again, welcoming them and making them feel supported and loved and heard and listened to. We don't do that enough nowadays, and so that's a big way. The other big way, I think, is honestly just ministering what we're doing here. The work that we're doing here is not a typical orphanage. It's not a government home. These kids are not being thrown in prison cells. They're
right.
being loved and cared for in
Mm,
the way that Christ would love them. They're going to
right.
church. They're going to school. They're being taught Bible lessons. Typical churches or orphanages do not do that. You don't ever hear of that in the States, or much less a place like Ecuador. And so these kids that are staying with us long term, they know the Bible in and out. They know that even though they have
Amazing.
unfortunate circumstances, they are loved and they are cared for like no other, and they are still God's children. They still have a purpose and they still have value. And so, sharing
Amazing.
with our supporters that they are welcome, that they can come see, and that they're a part of what we're doing, on top of actually doing what we're doing and ministering to these kids directly. I think they go hand in hand with, that's how we make disciples, right? We do the work, but we also share the work.
Jesus was, he very famously um, told people, "Hey, send me the kids. Don't send away the kids. Send me the
Right.
kids. I want to talk to the kids." He loved the children.
Hmm.
And this is something, ever since I was a very young person, I've always just had so much love for little kids and children. I served in with the kids today at church. Sharing love with children,
Yeah.
it is precious, and children have open hearts. They have open minds. They're so they're like clay to be molded, and
True.
we can really damage children, and we can really mold them. We can really love them. We can teach them God's love.
Hmm.
There's a reason why in the Bible it says to have faith like a child. Um,
Yeah.
it's dangerous because if you tell a kid something, they'll believe you. Um,
Right.
but
Right.
the thing is if you tell a child something that is true, they will believe that also.
Exactly.
So that's why it's a little bit dangerous, because if you tell a child a lie, if you tell a child, you're stupid, they're
Right.
going to believe that,
Yep.
and if you tell a child, you know Jesus loves you, they're going to believe that too.
Exactly.
So you got to be careful with kids, and
Hmm.
just having that and following through with that is so important and so powerful, and using that is just so important. And then I love what you said about the other half of that. You're teaching God's love to these children, but
Hmm.
the other way that you're fulfilling the Great Commission is you're bringing people in and
Hmm.
showing them you can do this.
Yep.
It's, you know, for me, I think missionaries, oh, that's those people. Those people are missionaries. That's
Right.
them. They do
Right.
that. That's for other people.
Yep.
Maybe I'll send them some money so that they can do that.
Right. Right.
Where, it doesn't say those people go into all the world. He tells me, go into all the world and make disciples of
Right.
all people. This is,
Right.
the Great Commission is for all of us. And,
Yep.
like, heck, we don't all need to go to Ecuador. Um,
Right.
but, like, making disciples of all people is for all of us. And,
Exactly.
like you said, bringing people in
Hmm.
might make us a shift in your perception of how you approach the world, and say, what, maybe I need to do something a little differently in my own life. I think that's amazing. That's a really
Right.
awesome perspective that you just brought. What do you
Yeah.
have? Do you have maybe something as your time that you might consider like a favorite or a best moment that you've experienced?
As soon as we got down here, I've been here for. I'm like I said, I'm still in Quito. I've been here
You're
for
in
a little.
Ecuador right now.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. I'm at the
Nice.
home. I'm at Forest Children. I'm staying here.
Oh, nice.
There's like a building that has an apartment above. So like I'm on the second floor. The first floor is literally where the babies are, all the little kids.
Oh,
So
wow.
if my computer's more advanced, you could probably hear the baby screaming right now. But um, but as soon as I got here, which is about 2 weeks ago, and again, this is my first time coming back in 20 years. Like I'm coming home, sort of thing. As soon as I got here, the next day we got a little tour and we saw the kids and we got to visit with them and meet them and kind of get to know the place again. I'm not apprehensive to come down. I wasn't emotional to come down. It's one of those things, and my parents and I talked about it. Are you scared to go? Are you nervous? Are you excited? And it's one of those things. It's like I don't know how to feel. I was 5 when I left, and who remembers much when they were 5, anyways? Right? Like, I mean, do you remember much when you were 5 years old, or less than
No,
that? Like,
not
you
at
just
all.
don't.
Nope.
And so that's why I was like, I'm coming home, but like I don't feel like I'm coming home.
Right.
So I think God knew that in my heart, and He wanted to completely just melt that away. And so on our tour, very first went downstairs, saw the babies. We opened the door, and one of these amazing, sweet little girls that I'm sure we got to know her story has suffered so much in our life. She's 3 years old, and she's probably one of the prettiest girls I've ever seen in my life. Just ran up to me and grabbed me and hugged me, and I've never had that. And to have a child just absolutely love you unconditionally as Christ loves us unconditionally, it's beautiful. And I think that was probably one of my best moments that I've had here is again the apprehension and the anxiety of how's this going to go? I'm here for
Perfect.
like 4 weeks. How
Yeah.
I don't know how that's going to act out, but God's like, no, I got you. These kids are going to help you, and
Yeah.
He did it.
That's perfect, man. That's awesome. Okay, so do you have advice if someone's listening to the show right now or watching this on YouTube? Um, Advice for someone that is maybe interested in giving, or interested in visiting, or interested in getting involved in missionary mission ministries or whatever. Where would they start? What's the first step?
Well, first step is probably our website. For His Children Ecuador, just Google that, you'll find it, and you can read stories, you can watch things, videos. We've got all the information on there. My piece of advice for anybody that's remotely interested or has questions or concerns or anything like that, it works. I'm here to tell you, as an orphan that literally was here, my mom abandoned me. I don't know my
Mm,
father. I don't know. I have a half brother. I don't know anything about him. I don't know anything about my family. God took care of me. It
mm-hmm.
works. The ministry itself works, and I think
Yeah.
a lot of times we watch these. I always think of the SPCA dog commercials that make you super sad with Sarah McLachlan, and I think about these commercials that make you super sad when they show babies that are suffering in other countries or things like that, and you're watching these and you're like, why would I give my $5 or $10 to these people? How do I even what do I even know about them? I'm here to tell you, as someone that was literally here, it works.
Yeah.
And we have so much more work to do though. And people can be involved any which way that they want to. They can get their newsletters and that's it. They can give and that's it. They can come down and that's it. They can be as involved as little or as much as they want. But if they have questions, if they have inkling to be involved any way whatsoever, go to our website, contact any of our amazing staff, ask your questions. There's no wrong questions. There's no stupid questions.
Mm-hmm.
We're all loved and we've all got passions, but we've all got inklings to make differences. And if you're going to make a difference in a child's life that has literally gone through hell and back and now is being supported and you can change that, make that difference. Go ahead and take that extra step that you want to today. So that's probably much what I would say.
We're getting towards the end here. What is for you, Darwin, and for his children, especially in Ecuador? What is name of the show? N+1. What are you guys looking forward to? What is next on the horizon? Is there any big projects coming up? Is there any big trips coming up? Is there like I don't know. What are you looking forward to?
Yeah, well, I think for me personally, in my role as someone who's just starting out, I I'm excited to meet people, and whether that's people that have been supporting us for years, or whether that's people that are just hearing us on this podcast, or when I come to visit churches or talk to people, and people that have questions. I'm excited to just meet people and talk to them and share and listen, and make them feel heard and valued. That they can make a difference and they can join it as well. For the ministry itself, are the coincidentally today was presidential elections in Ecuador, and the
Mm,
new kind of I guess government and government body is going through a wave of trying to figure out if a formalized government foster care system is something that should be implemented or not. And so we are looking towards seeing if that's going to happen or not and what our role is in that. And so for the ministry, we're trying to just kind of figure out where our place is. And so we need prayer.
hmm
We need people that are willing to be involved and just ask questions and continue to pray and support us. And so, moving forward, N+1 for the ministry is just continue to doing what God's called us to do, but also making sure that we're adaptable and flexible per God's timing. So yeah.
Amazing. That is wonderful. Thank you so much. Well, thank you so much for coming on. I really appreciate you making time on a Sunday. You are in Ecuador. This might be the furthest away interview I've ever done, so that's awesome. And
That's,
the internet's working pretty good, so that's awesome. So thanks for coming on the show. How can people find you, connect with you, reach you? How can people get in touch with
Yeah, well, thanks. Thank you again for having me. This is awesome, and hope to continue to connect in the future and see where that goes forward.
you? Yeah.
Follow me. You can. I'm on social media. I'm on Facebook, Instagram. I'll show pictures and updates of my trip and the organization and the ministry and how it's going. Email. It's very simple. It's literally my name, Darwin, DARWIN @forwardschildren.org. We got our website. Just ask questions. Be you know be attentive to what the Lord's calling you to do. And if He's calling you to, reach out to a random ministry that you just heard of on this podcast, do that. But yeah, never be a stranger.
And as always, I will put links to everything in the show notes, whether you're watching on YouTube or listening in an audio player. I'll put his Instagram handle. I'll put links to for his children. I'll put all that stuff in the show notes. So if you are interested in learning more about the organization or donating or any of that stuff, it will all be in the show notes. So please go check that out. It's a great ministry that's been around for a long time. They're missionary doing good work. And if you want to get in touch with our Darwin to learn more about that, his Instagram will be on there, or you can contact him through For His Children. So you can learn more about that there. But before we go, we'll ask you the 2 silly questions that I ask every guest. This is my favorite part of the show.
Awesome.
So, Darwin, I want you to say a sentence or 2 and casually drop the name of the most famous person that you've ever met.
Ooh. Most famous person. Oh, okay. Well, from Reno, UNR, and some people might like it, some people not. But being from UNR, I was involved, and I got to meet Colin Kaepernick when he was, and obviously the famous football player that made the big news for kneeling for the national anthem, which again, people may or may not like, but but I met him, and amazing dude. So yeah.
Yeah, that definitely counts as a famous person. All right, thank you so much. And then the last question, and we will get you out of here. And this might be different because you're from Ecuador. I don't know, you might have had different shows growing up, but then you moved to the States, so who knows? But what is, in your opinion, the greatest all-time cartoon theme song?
Oh, cartoon theme song. So I was raised Christian, which means my parents didn't let me watch a lot. But what I did watch, and what I still remember to this day, forever in this head, and I used to love it, VeggieTales.
VeggieTales. I knew it was coming, man. You like to waltz with those potatoes up and down the produce aisle. I knew it was coming, man.
Classic.
I had a conversation this week about VeggieTales at work. That's great. Okay, you can't do VeggieTales is classic. I would say I was listening to some cartoon theme songs, and I would say it doesn't go as hard as some of the other theme songs, but it's just so catchy. And those of us that grew up Christian, we just listened to it so many times over and over. And they're so charming, the VeggieTales. I would say, like, if you listen to it back to back with some of the other cartoon theme songs that we mentioned on the show, the Animaniacs and the DuckTales and the X-Men and all these other the ones that that we get mentioned all the time. I don't think it holds up, but it is charming. It has a place in our hearts, and it is very catchy. So yeah, it's definitely a valid answer. So once again, thanks for coming on the show. Guys, this has been Adam from the N+1 podcast. I do want to say my family has started a Redbubble store to support our homeschool account. My wife came on, we talked about our homeschool account, but on our Redbubble store to support our homeschool, I threw some N+1 podcast hats and some Miller Custom Guitar shirts. So if you are interested in getting one of those, you can pick one up. Anyway, I got mostly put them on there so I could buy one and wear one, but that's why I'm wearing that. Anyway, if you like this episode, make sure you click like and click subscribe. The best thing you can do to help grow the show is to share this with someone that you think might enjoy it. This is a great episode to share because it spreads information about For His Children, which is a great ministry. But anyway, thanks so much for coming on the show, Darwin. And until next time, everybody, don't be a jerk.